princess always believed her human husband was the weakest creature aboard the diplomatic star cruiser. Soft voice, gentle hands, no claws, no armor, no warrior's fire. But the night the ship was boarded, everything she thought she knew shattered. Because when the walls blew open and killers flooded the halls, the fragile human stepped forward, calm, steady, and terrifyingly sure of himself. And in a moment that rewrote her entire world, she learned humans aren't weak. They're survivors. Hey, before we dive deeper into this wild HFY story, do me a favor. If you're enjoying this vibe so far, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves sci-fi with a punch. It helps the channel grow, and it lets me keep bringing you stories packed with suspense, heart, and those surprising human moments that make HFY so fun. All right, ready to see how the weak human changes everything? The princess had always believed she understood strength. She was Valkyr, born from a lineage of warriors who forged their honor in ritual combat and lived their lives with spines straight, voices sharp, and hearts trained never to tremble. Strength was in the clash of metal, in the discipline of battle formations, in the weight of tradition. So when the Alliance forced her into a political marriage with a human, a species her people barely respected, she accepted the arrangement with a silent bitterness. After all, how strong could a creature be if it didn't have claws, natural armor, or even a proper combat crest? Humans looked like they were made of soft fabric and wishful thinking. Her husband, Gene, didn't help that perception. He was quiet, calm, always polite, always gentle. He spoke with a softness that almost felt out of place among the sharp-tongued Valkyr diplomats. He spent his mornings tending a tiny green plant from Earth, something he called basil, and his evenings reading thin, fragile books made of dried wood pulp. No glowing arch tablets, no tactical screens, just paper. He even smiled too easily. And every time he smiled, she felt the sting of humiliation. This was the man meant to represent humanity's strength? A man who looked like he would bruise if someone exhaled too hard? Standing beside him at ceremonies was a daily battle against embarrassment. Her father, the High Warden, had insisted the marriage would bind their nations, but it felt more like an insult. A Valkyr princess paired with him, a quiet, breakable diplomat with hair that fell into his eyes and hands that didn't know the weight of weapons. Gene never complained about her coldness. He simply carried himself with that infuriating calm, as if nothing in the world could disturb the steady rhythm of his breathing. But deep down, she knew she wasn't angry at him. She was angry at what he represented, a reminder that her culture, her training, her identity, everything could be reduced to political convenience. The diplomatic star cruiser had been in transit for weeks, holding representatives from both species. Endless negotiations, endless ceremonies, endless reminders that peace required sacrifice. And night after night, Jean would sit across from her at their shared quarters, sipping tea, reading quietly, offering small conversations that never pierced her distrust. It was an odd marriage, two people sharing a space, yet living inside separate worlds. But everything changed the moment the alarm screamed. It began with a vibration, a strange, deep tremor that shivered through the hall. Then came the roar of emergency sirens, red lights bursting alive across every panel. The floor tilted as something massive struck the ship from below. The princess rose instantly, reflexes sharp, hand reaching for her ceremonial dagger. Gene simply looked up from his book. A second impact hit the ship, harder. Metal groaned. The lights flickered. Her guards burst into the room, armor humming, weapons charged. "Princess, we are under assault. Stay behind us." Jean stood there, spine straight, but still calm, too calm for someone so weak. The princess saw it in his eyes. He thought he was going to die. And yet he didn't panic, didn't shout, didn't freeze. He simply closed his book, placed it on the table, and exhaled through his nose as if centering himself. The doors blew open. Smoke poured into the corridor as a swarm of Cater pirates burst inside. Hulking, vicious creatures with serrated armor and weapons carved from bone and metal. They fired immediately. The air cracked with kinetic blasts. Her guards pushed forward, shields flaring bright as they intercepted the first wave. Chaos erupted. Her people fought hard, but there were too many invaders, too fast, too coordinated. The pirates weren't here to loot. They were here to kill. One guard went down, armor pierced. Another fell screaming as a caterer dragged him into the smoke. The princess's heartbeat slammed against her ribs. The training that had shaped her life surged up, stand, fight, die with honor if needed. She reached for her blade. But before she could step forward, Jean quietly said, "Stay behind me." She turned to him. "What?" "Jean, no. Stay back. This is not your—" But he had already moved. Calm, silent, almost casual. It would have been comical if it hadn't been so horrifying. A pirate lunged at him, raising a spiked club the size of his torso. The princess braced herself to watch her husband's bones shatter. But instead, she heard a sound she'd never heard from any human. A clean, sharp crack. The pirate's arm bent in on itself like snapped metal. He dropped, howling. Jean stood in front of him, holding the broken club. His face had changed, not physically, but in something deeper. His softness was gone. His eyes, those gentle, warm human eyes, had gone cold, focused, predatory. He stepped forward without hesitation. Another pirate charged. Jean ducked under a blade, twisted the attacker's wrist, and slammed the club into the alien's throat. He moved with brutal precision. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no fear. This wasn't training. This wasn't ceremony. This was survival. A pure, practiced instinct carved by a world far deadlier than any Valkyr battlefield. He fought like someone who'd done this 1,000 times, like someone who had learned the hard way that hesitation meant death. The princess stood frozen. Jean, the quiet diplomat. Jean, the fragile husband. Jean, the man she had pitted, moved like a storm unleashed. Her guards stared in disbelief as he dismantled attackers one by one, breaking joints, deflecting blades, grabbing weapons midair, and turning them back on their owners. No ritual stance, no elegant Valkyr technique, only efficiency, brutality, and terrifying precision. When the last pirate fell, Jean stood still, chest rising barely above normal breathing. His diplomatic suit was splattered with green alien blood. He turned toward her slowly, the predator fading back behind a familiar calm. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice soft again. She couldn't answer. The dagger in her hand suddenly felt like a child's toy. Everything she thought she knew about humans, about weakness, about him, crumbled. And deep inside her chest, something new stirred. Not fear, not disgust, but a dangerous, undeniable curiosity. The ship's alarms were still howling when the princess realized she hadn't taken a full breath in nearly a minute. The hall outside their quarters was a battlefield, sparks flying, armor scraping, bodies hitting the deck with sickening thuds. Smoke clung to the ceiling in jagged streaks. The world had ruptured into violence, and yet her human husband stood in the center of it all like he had been waiting for this exact moment. Jean scanned the corridor, not with fear, but with a strange, sharp clarity. His shoulders were relaxed. His movements were measured. He didn't behave like prey cornered by predators. He behaved like someone finally stepping into familiar ground. And that terrified her more than the pirates. Another wave of cater surged forward, hulking shapes with jaws that unhinged when they roared. Their armor looked cobbled together from stolen ship scraps and bones of beasts no Valkyr had ever identified. They charged with that savage confidence of raiders who expected resistance to crumble. The first pirate swung a broad blade toward Jin's ribs. He didn't dodge. He slipped out of the strike, turning his torso at an angle so precise it looked instinctive. The blade passed centimeters from him, the air hissing from its speed. Before the pirate recovered balance, Jean stepped inside the attacker's guard and drove an open palm into the soft joint under the creature's arm. The pirate collapsed. No battle cry, no hesitation, just motion, clean, brutal motion. The princess watched, stunned, as Jean grabbed the fallen alien's weapon, a serrated kinetic blade humming with unstable energy. It didn't matter if he'd never seen this kind of tech. He held it like he'd been born with it in his hand. Her guards were fighting too, But even they took brief, startled glances at Jean, like they were trying to understand whether the calm man cutting through pirates was the same person who spent days watering a basil plant. One guard barked, "Human, behind our shield wall." Jean didn't answer. He was already sprinting past the shield wall. The Valkyr warriors exchanged looks that were half outrage, half disbelief. The princess didn't know where to look, at her guards struggling to maintain formation, or at the human who moved with a confidence that made even trained soldiers seem slow. Then she saw something she had never seen before. The pirates, those brutal raiders known for laughing in the face of blood, hesitated. Not long, not enough to call it fear, but enough to know they'd recognized something in Jin's body language that warned them. This is not a soft target. One Cater warrior, larger than the others, pointed at Jean and roared something unintelligible. The others adjusted formation, shifting to circle him. That was new. Cater didn't circle prey, they overwhelmed it. The princess whispered, barely audible even to herself, "They're afraid of him." Jean noticed a shift too. He slowed, blade held loosely at his side, eyes tracking the positions of every pirate like he was reading them page by page. One pirate lunged. Jean didn't parry. He stepped aside and let the momentum carry the alien past him, then drove the serrated edge cleanly across its spine. The creature fell, twitching. Fabric-soft human hands shouldn't have been capable of such precision. But Jean didn't fight with strength. He fought with calculation. Another pirate rushed in from behind. She shouted, "Jean." He didn't turn. He dropped. Just dropped flat, letting the pirate's blade swing where his spine had been, then rolled to one knee and cut upward in a motion so efficient it almost looked gentle, until the spray of green blood exploded across the floor. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't luck. This wasn't desperation. Her husband was trained, not like a guard learning a discipline, not like a soldier drilled in patterns. No, this was experience burned into bone. Instinct honed by surviving scenarios far more dangerous than a diplomatic cruiser under siege. Why had he hidden it? Her guards finally reclaimed the front line, pushing into the corridor with renewed energy, almost embarrassed they'd been outdone by a man they dismissed as harmless. Together, they formed a protective arc, finally creating pockets of control. But Jean had moved again. She lost sight of him for a second in the haze of smoke and sparks. Her heart lurched. When she found him again, he was already past the central junction, entering a wider hall where the ship's main structural supports arched overhead like giant ribs. Bodies, pirate bodies, were scattered across the ground. He had cleared the hall on his own. Her pulse hammered wildly. "When?" she whispered. "Ow!" But there was no time to process it. A deeper boom shook the ship. A shock wave trembled through the decking. Panels flickered violently. The hull groaned like something enormous had latched onto it. "That wasn't Cater weaponry," one of her guards growled. "They have reinforcements?" another asked. "No," Jean said from ahead, his voice echoing down the hall. He stood near a damaged viewport, staring at something outside. Something enormous. Something wrong. The princess stepped beside him, breath catching. Another vessel, if you could call it a vessel, was clamped onto the star cruiser's flank. It wasn't built. It was grown. Organic plates. Pulsing ridges. Tendrils latched like roots digging into their hull. The pirates hadn't boarded alone. Her heartbeat spiked. "What is that?" Jean didn't answer immediately. His jaw tightened. His shoulders lowered, not in defeat, but in a different kind of preparation. Something colder. Something that said he recognized what he was seeing, even if he wished he didn't. "Not Cater," he said softly. Something smarter. The princess felt a chill trace her spine. A new breach warning flared across the corridor. Klaxons wailed. Systems strained. The wall beside them dented inward, twice, like metal being punched from the other side. Her guards snapped into formation again. Jean stepped forward instead. "No, get back," she shouted. "Princess," he said quietly, "whatever is breaking through that wall, it isn't here for you." The metal screamed. A crack split across the surface. Debris burst outward. Everyone braced. Everyone except Jean, who stepped into the center of the hall, blade held low, breathing steady. The princess stared at him, her confusion now mixing with fear and something else, something she didn't want to name yet. And when the wall finally caved inward, revealing a silhouette she could barely comprehend, Jean whispered something under his breath, a sentence she never forgot. "It's me they want." The thing standing behind the shattered metal wasn't Cater. It wasn't anything she'd seen in any Alliance briefing, any military archive, any capture biology file. Its silhouette was humanoid, but stretched, taller, leaner, armored with plates that shimmered like living obsidian. Tiny pulses of amber light beat beneath its surface like a second heartbeat. Its joints bent with too much flexibility, its limbs too long, its eyes two glowing slits that radiated cold intelligence. It stepped through the breach as if it owned the corridor. Her guards raised their weapons. The creature didn't even glance at them. Its eyes locked on Jean. Her stomach dropped. "Jean," she whispered, "get behind the shield line." He didn't move. The creature tilted its head, observing him with something too sharp to be called curiosity. "You," it said, voice smooth, disturbingly calm. "Human." Finally. The word finally sounded wrong. Too knowing. As if this thing had been looking for him long before the attack even began. Her guards advanced as one. "Princess, retreat." "We'll hold it." But Jean stepped forward, raising a hand. Not to the creature, but to the guards. "Don't," he said. The princess felt heat rising in her chest. "Jean, what are you doing?" His expression didn't shift. His voice didn't change. But something in his posture, something deeply rooted, made her breath catch. "Saving your lives." The creature moved. No, appeared, one moment still, the next standing inches from Jean without crossing the distance between. A ripple of distortion flickered through the air in its wake. Her guards reacted too late. Their weapons fired into empty space where the creature had been. Her heart lurched. Jean didn't flinch. The creature studied him the way a scientist might examine a specimen. "So calm," it murmured. "Even now, your species is inconsistent, primitive, and yet," it leaned closer, "capable of anomaly." "Back away from him," the princess shouted, stepping forward. Jean didn't turn, didn't break eye contact with the creature. "Stay behind them," he said softly. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. The creature's eyes glowed brighter. "Your heart rate. It does not change." "Fascinating." Jean exhaled, slow, steady, deliberate. "You came for data," he said. "Not conquest. Not trophies." Her blood went cold. "Not conquest. Not trophies. Data." She felt the entire shape of the attack shift in her mind. The pirates, the chaos, the damage. It wasn't a war tactic. It was a distraction, a test. The creature smiled, not with its mouth, but with a ripple of amber light across its faceplate. "You understand more than most. Good. That will make this simpler." It raised one long arm, fingers unfolding like blades. Her guards lunged. Too slow. The creature blurred, and the guards were thrown like dolls, armor sparking as they smashed into the walls. One didn't rise. The other struggled, dazed and bleeding. "And oh," the princess cried out. She tried to bolt forward, dagger drawn, but Jean caught her wrist, gently but firmly. His touch wasn't forceful. It was desperate. "Not you," he said, voice low. "They don't want you." Tears stung her eyes, not from fear, but from something far heavier. She had misjudged him for so long. Jean stepped forward until he stood between her and the creature. His silhouette, small compared to the alien's towering form, held a weight she didn't understand. "You're here to evaluate humanity," he said. "Fine. Evaluate me." Her voice cracked. "Jean, stop." The creature's amber slits narrowed. "We evaluate potential, threat, adaptability, expansion instinct. You exemplify all three." Jin's jaw tightened. "I don't represent my entire species." "No," the creature agreed, "but you represent the direction it will inevitably evolve." Her breath froze. They weren't hunting Jean. They were hunting what he symbolized. Humanity's future. The creature shifted its posture, ready to strike. Jean mirrored the stance. Not with elegance, not with training patterns, but with lethal stillness. "Don't fight," she begged. "You can't win against." He answered without turning. "I'm not fighting to win. The creature lunged. Jean moved. Metal screamed. Air warped. Sparks rained. Neither used weapons at first. Only limbs, fists, and terrifying speed. The princess couldn't follow their movements. It was like watching lightning striking in two directions at once. The creature's strikes were precise, surgical. Jin's responses were raw, instinctive. He blocked with moments to spare, rolled under crushing blows, snapped his elbow into the creature's knee joint, making the alien stumble. Her eyes widened. He wasn't trying to outmatch its strength. He was forcing it to adapt. Every move Jean made forced a recalculation. Every strike altered the creature's rhythm. Every dodge disrupted the predicted combat flow. Humans weren't strong. They weren't armored. They weren't engineered for war. But humans, real humans, didn't survive because of strength. They survived because they changed faster than anything else alive. The creature hissed, a glitching sound of static frustration. Your kind always deviates. Welcome to Earth, Jean said. But the creature adapted too. It flickered to the side, an impossible acceleration, and slammed Jean into the wall. Her heart dropped as he gasped, blood spraying across metal. Jean! He didn't fall. He pushed off the wall and struck again, aiming at the alien's throat. The creature caught his fist mid-air. Its voice emerged colder. You are admirable, but predictable in your defiance. It lifted him by the throat. Stop! The princess screamed, rushing forward. A blast of kinetic force hurled her backward. She hit the ground hard, vision blurring. Through the haze, she saw the creature holding Jean aloft, studying him the way one might study a dangerous insect. A human capable of this level of combat instinct, intriguing, but unnecessary to preserve. We only require samples. It tightened its grip. Jin's feet kicked against the air. His hands clawed at the creature's wrist. His face reddened. His eyes flickered. She felt something inside her tear. Not anger. Not fear. Something older. Deeper. No, she whispered. Her hands clenched. She pushed through the pain and rose, staggering toward them. Her guards tried to rise but couldn't. It didn't matter. Only Jean mattered. Let him go, she screamed, her voice cracking through smoke and alarms. The creature paused. Not because of her. Because Jean had stopped struggling. His hands had loosened. His gaze drifted, not in defeat, but in realization. He wasn't trying to pry the creature's hand away. He was reaching for something on its armor, something that pulsed faintly beneath the plates. A control node, a nerve cluster, a weakness. Bad choice, Jean rasped. He pressed his thumb into the node. The creature spasmed. Electricity arced through its armor. It released him instantly, stumbling backward as amber light flared violently across its body. Jean collapsed, coughing, gasping for air. The creature regained balance. Too quickly. You learn too fast, it hissed. That is why your species is dangerous. It raised its arm for a killing blow, but now she was between them. Her dagger pointed upward, breath trembling, shoulders squared. Touch him, she growled, and you'll learn how fast I adapt. The creature froze. For the first time, it looked uncertain, and in that tiny, fragile second of hesitation, Jean rose behind it, wounded, bleeding, barely standing, but alive. And when the creature sensed him and turned, Jean whispered one sentence that made the princess's heart stop. You wanted to evaluate a human? He raised the alien's dislodged node between his fingers. Start with this. And he crushed it. The corridor exploded in light. The explosion lit the corridor in a violent burst of amber, white, and sickly green. The air buckled. Panels tore from the walls. A shockwave ripped down the hall, so fast the princess barely had time to shield her face. Her ears rang. Her vision flared white. When the light receded, the alien creature staggered backward, armor flickering like a dying star. The crushed node still smoked in Jin's trembling hand. The creature emitted a distorted, warbling sound. Not pain, not fury, something stranger. Confusion? Distress? Its body pulsed with erratic amber lines, as though the crushed control core had severed its internal coherence. It rasped, voice warped. Human anomaly, incompatible, unpredictable. It tried to stabilize itself, but its limbs spasmed violently. A ripple of distortion ran down its form, and for a moment its outline flickered like a glitch in a broken projection. Jean wiped blood from his mouth and whispered, "Yeah, welcome to the club." The alien lashed out in a desperate, unstable strike. Jean moved slower now, his injuries dragging on him, but he still ducked under the blow. The princess darted in, slashing her dagger across the alien's forearm. The blade barely pierced the armor, but it was enough to disrupt the creature's balance. The thing hissed, stumbling backward. Her guards, finally recovering, lifted their weapons. "For the princess!" They roared, unleashing a storm of plasma. The alien staggered under the barrage. Its armor sparked in protest. The amber glow in its eyes dimmed. One more plasma bolt struck its chest, cracking the organic plates. The creature collapsed to one knee. Its final words came out glitching, looping strangely. "Evaluation. Incomplete. Humanity. Unstable variable. Return later." Then its body folded inward, as if being erased from reality. With a faint hum, it vanished, disintegrating into a cloud of shimmering particles that dissolved into the air. Silence. No pirates. No monstrosity. No more alarms. Just the low hum of emergency lighting flickering across the ruined corridor. Jean stumbled first. She caught him before he hit the ground. "Hey," he muttered weakly. "You're stronger than you look." Her throat tightened. "You are a reckless idiot," she whispered, voice trembling. "And you scare me more than anything in that attack." He managed a small, crooked smile. "Sorry. Force of habit." Her eyes widened. "Habit." He blinked, as if realizing he'd said too much. Before she could ask, Borlak approached, bruised and breathing heavily. "Princess." "Human Jean." He paused, staring at the scorch marks, the shattered armor, the traces of alien matter still crackling on the floor. What in the name of the first flame was that thing? Jean leaned back against the wall, wincing. Not Cater, not pirates. Something higher up the chain. "Higher," the princess echoed. He looked at her, really looked at her, with an exhaustion she didn't understand. "They're called Dridani, or at least that's what humans have nicknamed them. They're watchers, analysts. They don't conquer planets. They study them. They evaluate species." Her breath caught. Evaluate for what? For threat level. The princess felt something deep in her chest go cold. "Are we considered a threat?" Jean shook his head slowly. "Not you. Not the Valkyr." "Then who?" He held her gaze. "Humans." Her hands tightened around his. "Why? Because you fought back? Because you surprised them?" Jean exhaled, closing his eyes for a moment before answering. "Because humanity doesn't fit their models. Our behavior is messy, unpredictable. We survive things we shouldn't. We adapt too fast. We don't follow their patterns." The princess absorbed this in stunned silence. He continued, voice quiet. "They watched humanity for decades. We kept breaking their predictions, kept surviving catastrophes that should have finished us, kept evolving under conditions no species should withstand." Then he looked at her with an expression she had never seen from him, one heavy with truth. "That's why Earth is called a death world. Not because everything wants to kill us, but because everything tried." A chill ran down her spine. She finally understood. His calm wasn't softness. His gentleness wasn't weakness. His quiet wasn't fear. It was control. Control over instincts that had been carved over thousands of generations of desperate survival. "And you," she whispered. "What exactly are you, Jean?" He hesitated, then shrugged as if it were nothing. "Just a man from a difficult planet." Borlak snorted. "A man? Human. I saw you break a cater's arm like you were snapping dried roots." Jean winced. "I might have downplayed my training." A little. A little," the princess echoed, outraged and astonished. He lifted both hands weakly. "I didn't want you to think I was dangerous." The princess stared at him for a long, breathless moment. "You saved all of us," she said softly. "Still dangerous," he replied. She didn't deny it. She didn't need to. Before she could speak again, a new tremor flowed through the ship, a softer, slower vibration indicating a large-scale docking. Her guard checked the sensors. Princess, multiple Valkyr ships are arriving. The fleet is here. Relief flooded the crew. Officers and medics rushed into the ruin hall. The atmosphere shifted from terror to exhaustion and shaky triumph. But the princess kept her eyes on Jean. He looked small again, human, fragile. But now she understood the falseness of that image. She brushed her fingers across his cheek. "You're hurt." He chuckled weakly. "So are you." She hadn't noticed the bruises on her arms, the small cuts on her face. She barely felt them. All she felt was the weight of a truth that had been invisible until now. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked quietly. "Why pretend to be fragile?" His eyes softened, not with shame, but with something like tired honesty. "Because humans already scare the galaxy," he murmured. "I didn't want to scare you too." Her chest tightened. For the first time since their union, she touched his face without hesitation, guiding him gently against her armor. "You're my husband," she whispered. "You don't have to hide from me." His breath caught just slightly. Borlak glanced between them and groaned. "By the first flame, please don't start kissing while I'm half dead." The princess almost laughed. Almost, but Jean swayed, his knees buckling. She caught him instantly. "Easy," she whispered. "You're not collapsing on me again." He smiled faintly. "Not again." She flicked his forehead. "Don't make me carry you." He blinked. "Would you?" "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "And I'd brag about it." He laughed weakly as medics hurried over, lifting him onto a stretcher. The princess walked beside them, refusing to let go of his hand. As they moved through the damaged corridors, she knew the truth with absolute clarity. Her father hadn't given her a weak human in a political arrangement. He had given her someone the galaxy feared, someone who could survive anything, someone who had stood between her and death without hesitation. She squeezed his hand. Humans were not fragile. Humans were fire, quiet until ignited. And Jean was already burning.